Welcome to Fix and Fly, the business podcast, which identifies common business issues for you to watch out for in your day-to-day business life. So tune in every fortnight where we speak to leaders of corporates to SMEs where you can implement their strategies into your business. I'm your host, Larissa Logan from Fixity, where we help turn businesses around. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming on the Fix and Fly podcast today.
Pleasure.
So, Steve, can you please tell our audience a bit about what you do as CEO of Hospitality New Zealand?
Sure. Hospitality New Zealand is a membership association. We've got around 2,500 members, and that spans everything right across the whole hospitality spectrum. So accommodation, everything from luxury lodges through to bed and breakfasts. And on the other side of the business, probably 2/3 of our membership is in the F&B side of things. So you're talking restaurants, bars, pubs, clubs. So it's quite broad, and there are a lot of niche issues that sort of sit within that membership cohort, and some variability up and down the country too, depending on local council restrictions and regulations. So it's certainly an interesting role. It's never dull.
That's probably a good lead into what does the New Zealand landscape look like around these different sectors at the moment?
I think most people understand that hospitality has been a pretty mixed bag and has been for some time. The expected recovery post-COVID just hasn't materialised in the way that people had hoped. There was an initial surge when we sort of came out of those lockdowns and people had obviously been accustomed to making their own coffees at home, and they were dying to get something made that was professional. So there was quite a strong uplift just off the back of COVID, where people were keen to get back out and about again. Even though that was a little bit muted because we still had social distancing requirements and other things in place. So there was a boost there, which was great, but we just haven't seen that sustained. Households continue to feel economic pressure, spending is muted, international recovery of tourism has been slower than we would like, starting to see a little bit of an uplift, but we're still talking a couple of years before I think we see us get back to the numbers we were experiencing pre-COVID. So it's been a case of hanging in there for most businesses. There is variability though. Some businesses are actually performing extremely well. Those that have got an established product, good reputation, have kept their offering sharp, and have looked at how to introduce new ways of doing business, have continued to thrive and are showing the way. But the lion's share of operators, I think, are still living hand to mouth and finding day-to-day trade really hard.
So what are some of the common financial pressures that you're seeing amongst your membership base?
I think everybody understands inflation's had a huge impact. Just the cost of produce is hurting. Staffing is a huge issue as well at the moment. We're struggling to attract and more importantly retain talent. It gets snapped up and moves off into other career paths. And keeping your product offering sharp enough to incentivise people to come in, given how competitive it is at the moment and how hard it is to get households to give up $1 here and there. Really the key issues that are facing our industry at the moment. On the accommodation side, it's really supply as well. So those international visitor numbers, as I say, proving really stubborn to move. And as a result, the additional capacity that we saw come online pre-COVID, as we were expecting visitor numbers to surge, has had to reduce its rates so drastically that it's pretty easy to find a hotel and a motel room here in Auckland for under $100 a night at the moment. That was unheard of 6 or 7 years ago. So businesses really doing it tough, mainly because they're struggling to get that customer base to return.
So what can local government and the regions do to improve these stats and occupancy rates for accommodation providers?
It's a real challenge for local government. They've got their own cost pressures. So we've seen up and down the country, most councils had previously funded visitor-related activity to a reasonably healthy extent. Councils have got regional tourism organisations or economic development agencies that they would fund to do tourism marketing and promotion and to invest in major events. So if you think about Auckland here, prior to COVID, there was an agency called Auckland Tourism Events and Economic Development. It's been rebranded as Tātaki Auckland Unlimited. Used to have around $30 million a year to invest into this type of activity. That funding is largely gone, and as a result, the events calendar is much lighter than it was 5 or 6 years ago. And council is not showing any desire to return that funding back to those pre-COVID levels because they're under such pressure. They can't increase rates. Obviously, ratepayers don't want to see rates going up too high, so something's had to give. There's quite a bit of work going in across the local government environment and with ourselves and other associations to see some alternative form of funding come in to enable us to have a little bit more effort and investment into major events, business events, and that marketing piece. But at the moment, the government's quite resistant to introducing a nationwide levy or a bed tax because it's just not a priority for them. That's not stopping us continuing to agitate for it. We think it's the right thing to do. It's pretty commonplace around the world, and a modest charge onto people's stay at a hotel or motel attached to your bill, held centrally but returned to the region that it's generated in, would certainly help to make sure we've got good content, not just for visitors, but for people who live in the regions too, who want good things to go out and see and do.
And just drawing back onto the people element, which are the fundamental backbone of any business. I've recently stayed at a motel and I saw the owner basically rolling his sleeves up, getting in there, changing the bed before I got in, making sure the bathroom was tidy, and then he's behind the front desk checking me in. He was doing everything, and actually the cost of staying there was quite low. What's your view on the amount of effort that these owners now have to put in to try to get customers in the door?
Yeah, it's huge. You see it. I have in the role. I obviously have to travel a lot up and down the country, and I see what you've just described day in, day out, particularly in the motel side of things, where people have had to cut back costs so drastically that they are literally doing every job within the organisation, and they're having to do that to keep the lights on. So there's a huge amount of fatigue out there as well because people are forced to work 7 days a week and do all those tasks. It means it's really hard for them to think about how to grow the business and to be focused on that side of things when you're so immersed in the detail of keeping the lights on day to day. So it is a concern, and until we see those visitor numbers pick up, it's really hard to see that resolving itself quickly.
Are there any standout regions in New Zealand that are performing well?
Well, Queenstown's obviously an outlier. It's actually back to where it was and accelerating in terms of its performance, in terms of attracting visitors, particularly out of Australia and the US. That's creating its own different set of pressures where the amount of visitation, the fact you've got people who are keen to capitalise on that through short-term rental accommodation means that the workforce can't afford to stay in Queenstown. So our business is actually struggling to find staff because there's too many visitors in town. So it's a different type of pressure in Queenstown. It's a real outlier. Christchurch is performing really well. Their council has retained some funding for that visitor space to ensure that there is stimulus for tourism and hospitality businesses. And obviously they've got a new stadium opening next year and a pretty interesting and exciting pipeline of events that they're in the prospect of trying to convert at the moment. Rotorua's had a bit of a resurgence. The Bay of Plenty has held itself up pretty well. And then other parts of the country have performed relatively well, given that they'd been impacted by severe weather events. So where we've got concerns is around Wellington and Auckland, who are continuing to underperform relative to past performance.
So what are the learnings that we can use from the likes of these other high performance areas and bring into these regions, Wellington and Auckland, to improve performance of these businesses?
Well, unfortunately, it comes down to political will, really. It's the leadership of those other locations, like Christchurch, for example, they've struck a balance quite correctly, I think, and I would say this, wouldn't I, given my profession. They've retained a focus on ensuring that they're driving the economic return for the region. Clearly, Christchurch is still realising the benefits of a very significant investment from government post-earthquake, but they've got a world-class business events venue there in Te Pai, which is performing extremely well. They've got this new stadium coming online, a redeveloped and refurbished city centre with some incredible hospitality offerings along the riverside there. So that investment is starting to pay off, but the council is obviously recognising that they need to continue to invest to support it. Here in Auckland, there's no shortage of effort. It's just that the funding isn't there to ensure that the events that the city's become accustomed to hosting are able to be held here. And with little appetite from government to provide some short-term relief, it's hard to see that coming back anytime soon.
So a couple of other challenges that I've seen in my day-to-day life, just walking down Albert Street with the City Rail Link, and there's been a number of, food and beverage operators who have subsequently shut down because they've just lost their patronage.
Yeah, it's been heartbreaking and has been for some years. It's been exacerbated by COVID again, obviously, but there was quite a protracted discussion and negotiation between local government, central government. I know Heart of the City was involved to support the business community there to try and find a way to ensure that those businesses were given some support, given that the infrastructure program and the impact of that was not something that those businesses had asked for. They were sold, I think, a vision as to what it would unlock, but we're still, some 7-8 years on, that's still not been realised. So it has been, a real difficult time for a lot of those businesses. It surprises me the number that have actually managed to find a way to hold on under the circumstances, because the customer base just disappeared completely. And I don't think that they were particularly well supported by local and central government through that period. In more recent times, we've seen council actually invest and provide some support to those businesses so that they can get membership benefits from the likes of ourselves, the Restaurant Association and Retail New Zealand. But it's come quite late in the piece. We would have liked to see that support provided much earlier. But at least it's something. It's giving us a chance to open up good conversations with those businesses in that area and to try and find ways to support them.
It's quite interesting looking at the stats around the number of operators in the food and beverage space, cafes, restaurants, all of that type of stuff, bars, pubs. They seem to be growing, and so there appear to be new businesses coming online all the time.
Yeah, there are. You're right. It's Shama Bel-Jacob, a renowned economist, has done quite a bit of statistical work for us, and he pointed out to us last year that at this point in time we've got more hospitality businesses operating than we ever have before. Of course, the headlines are taken up with the high-profile closures, but there's not a lot of attention on the new places that are opening. So that gives you some encouragement, but equally, given how difficult it is out there at the moment, it surprises me that the number that we have within this structure at the moment are able to continue to operate. I think there needs to be a little bit of contraction, but that's out of necessity, not out of the goodwill of the people who are trying to run those businesses. So I suspect you'll see a continued contraction over the course of the next few years. Even though we've seen growth, there's been, I think, a lot of people have a quite a romanticised view of being able to come into the hospo scene. We will experience being on the other side of the bar and think, it'd be nice to run my own place at some point. But it's a much harder proposition than people realise, particularly in the current climate.
Yeah, and especially when you can't get the right skilled staff, and if you're looking outside of the country to bring those people in.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, the industry's long had an issue trying to attract and develop talent from within New Zealand. There's been a perception that hospitality is low wage, low value career option for people. And I'm challenged by that because we've been talking here about people who are running businesses. It's a very I think it can be very lucrative opportunity for people to get into a career path that allows them to move up into middle management and senior management levels pretty quickly, to take those skills around the world, and to develop an opportunity to run their own venue in time. In other parts of the world, people who work in hospitality are celebrated. In fact, they're considered to be really important parts of their respective communities. And so if you're travelling through the US and through Europe, you often see people who are well into their 60s and 70s, in some instances their 80s, who are continuing to wait tables. But they have a different approach and different philosophy around hospitality. As I say, more celebrated. The tipping culture is much stronger, so people are able to make a really strong career out of it on the basis of that. Whereas in New Zealand, we've just undervalued it and haven't bothered to invest in it to the same extent that we should have.
What kind of steps can we take to kind of turn that around?
Yeah, it's a challenging one because on the one hand, we've got this really strong narrative about our manaakitanga. It's one of the strengths that we sell as part of our tourism proposition. We talk about how we welcome people, how we celebrate people, and how we'll treat you. Invariably, we talk about the fact that you come here for our beautiful landscapes and scenery and our visitor experiences, but you take the people experience away with you, and that's true. But there's a disconnect between that and the fact that we're not bringing enough people in to support the sector. So, we've talked with the Minister about the importance of trying to attract young people in. I think Louise Upston, through having the mix of portfolios she's very keen, I think, to see where she can provide more direct support. But we've got to shift that mindset, particularly with parents who still have a lot of influence in young people's career paths, around understanding that hospitality is a viable pathway. It does provide you with good skills. We would love to retain as many young people as possible, but certainly if we can keep people for a period of time before they head off into other pathways, that's still a win.
I guess one of the things that come to mind straight away around, I've got kids coming into the teenage sphere, and when they go out to get their first job, if they were working in hospitality, I would actually be a little bit concerned around them working in Queen Street in Auckland, for example, and having to finish a late shift and having to find their transport home again, just given kind of the risk issues in the CBD at the moment. Have you heard about this from, hospitality owners? Or?
Yeah. Look, I think operators in the city centre too are very mindful of looking after their staff, and so a number of them run particular initiatives to ensure that their staff are able to leave together, that they can carpool, that they're looked after to ensure that they can get from their mode of transport into the city centre to their workplace, particularly in those late evening periods where there are parts of the city centre that can be a little bit difficult to navigate, or you might not want to be walking around alone. So I think that, the responsibility that business owners have to look after their staff is very well understood, and I see that playing out pretty positively, particularly with larger employers who've got the scale and the ability to look after staff and have got security people who can look after people.
Are you seeing that a number of these businesses that are struggling have high levels of debt, which is a hangover from the COVID period?
Yeah, there's no doubt there across the sector. There's a lot of debt funding that's supporting businesses. It's one of the reasons why we're trying as much as possible to educate people about the importance of reaching out for support sooner rather than later. There's been some high-profile closures and businesses that have had to rescale and reshape and think about their proposition. We struggle sometimes, and I think this is a New Zealand thing. People don't want to reach out for help until it's too late, and we're trying to shift that mindset too. There's no harm in having a conversation about, hey, look, things have been a bit of a grind here for a couple of months. I might need somebody to give me some support to look at how I might find a way through, or are there some additional cost-cutting measures that I could introduce? But too often we're seeing the need to get people involved at a point when the horse is bolted. And that pride that people have, I think, in terms of how the image they want to project around it being a successful business and not wanting to lean into support until it's too late, is something we have to overcome.
I see that every day in the work that I do, right? People are trying to do everything themselves. They're trying to be the lawyer, the accountant, the business owner, health and safety, the cleaner, I agree with you. You need to reach out. You need to reach out to your accountants, your lawyers, to Hospitality New Zealand if you're a member. You provide an all-encompassing support package for your membership, right?
By virtue of being on the tools as much as people are, they often miss the key warning signs, I think.
Yeah.
It's as crazy as that sounds, because you would think it would be flashing right in front of your face. But the fact that they're doing everything that they need to be doing in order to keep the business going sometimes means that detail is overlooked. And I think, if I can just get through this week and next week will be better. But that week doesn't arrive, or it doesn't arrive soon enough. So, yeah, that's one of the virtues that we espouse to our members, is making sure that just have a check-in with one of your regional managers to make sure that you are okay and that you're supported, And if we need to connect you into something that'll provide a little bit of additional support around your finances and your business setup, then we can do that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of free templates out there for creating your own cash flow forecasting models and all of that type of stuff. Do you see business owners typically have good financial acumen or good reporting processes in place?
I think it's variable. I don't think people use technology in the way that they probably could either. There's a bit of a generational shift, I think, that still is yet to wash through hospitality, where you've got, on the accommodation side in particular, the motel sector, largely people who've been in that sector for a long time. And although they're aware of new technology, it's almost a sort of an imposition, bringing that into your business or trying to get your head around how it can help you. And so instead of trying to deal with something which actually make your life a lot easier, it's I'll get around to that eventually. So it still surprises me. We have got some very old ways of doing things, which can be quite a struggle in the current climate because they're quite labour intensive. And then when you do want to provide support to them, it can be really hard to unwind and unpick what people have been doing because it makes sense to them, but it doesn't make sense in today's business environment.
So if you were going to give advice to our listeners, what are the fundamentals that make a great business?
Well, being sure of your offering is critical. You know, as I say before, the sector has grown. We pride ourselves on the diversity and the strength of our manaakitanga. That means that there's almost everything in the world you could get here, and particularly in Auckland, given the diversity of our hospitality offering here. But there's a lot that makes it doesn't. There's stuff in here that is not unique. So how do you make sure that you're got a good customer base by developing something that's quite bespoke, is different to what others are offering? You're keeping your menu fresh, particularly if you're a food and beverage operator. You're not just delivering the same thing all the time. You've maybe got a couple of signature dishes that you're renowned for, but you're keeping your menu fresh otherwise and looking at seasonal offerings to create that point of difference for people. You're investing in your staff. You know, we all know that when we walk into a particularly good hospitality operator, the way that you're greeted, the way that you're treated, shown to your table, all of those things matter. You want to feel valued. You want to feel like you're the most important person who's walked into that venue. And there are places that do that extremely well. So I think that putting that customer first focus is still the key to doing hospitality well, and you can see and feel that when you walk into a good operator. I think there's a need for hospitality businesses to work more seamlessly together too. So it's one thing about having your own unique offering, but if you're part of a precinct, there's a need to work a little bit more seamlessly together around how you might leverage each other's marketing, how you might put deals together to create a sense of scale and to bring people into a particular area. And I don't think that's being done enough either. Everybody's competing for customers. They don't think about the benefit of, actually, if I reach out and we work together, we could probably lift our marketing capability and our reach beyond what we're currently doing. And I think that's something that gets a bit missed in the mix.
What is the best piece of business advice you have been given?
To look after your people is the main thing. I'm always keen to ensure that I'm thinking about your staff and investing in them. I have the good fortune of working with a team of people who are so proud of the role that they play in supporting the sector. I often have to pull them back a wee bit, to be honest, because they're so determined to deliver benefits to their respective communities. But looking at ways to continue to support them, they've been really exposed to some of the challenges on the front line around mental health and well-being. And so making sure they're equipped to deal with those, and then they're not taking those problems home with them, which can be a factor for people who are dealing with often quite emotional and difficult individuals, given the situations that they're in.
What kind of strategies are they putting in to be able to cope with that?
We've been working with some professional services to ensure that we're doing things in the right way. So there are some operators that we have partnered with who we're able to recognise we need to escalate a particular issue through to make sure that my staff aren't overexposed. They can do the basics, and they can certainly provide a really strong shoulder for people, and obviously want them to be open and honest with the circumstances that they're dealing with. But when it gets to a particular level, we need to make sure we're connecting people into the professional services and support that's available. There are some. It's a bit of a shame, I guess you'd say, that societally we've had to do this. It's not just hospo that's affected by this. It's every part of business. It's households as well. We've all had to weather a lot over the course of the last 5 to 7 years. But making sure that support is available to people is the most important thing.
Oh, I think it's fundamental. I see it with business owners that I speak to on a daily basis. They've been dealing with a significant amount of pressure and stress from the business not performing, from, it's never just one thing, right? The relationship's broken down, there's a matrimonial dispute, the kid's gone off the rails, you've got an aging parent, the list goes on, and it's a lot for one person to carry on their shoulders.
It is,
So it's really important that when business owners are feeling under stress, that they actually go out, they reach out for help.
100% agree, yeah. And that's effectively what Hospitality New Zealand is geared up to do. The advocacy piece is bread and butter, working to ensure that the government and local government is doing its utmost to provide support to the sector, looking to where we can cut regulatory issues and reduce costs and so on is fundamental to what Hospitality New Zealand is there to do. But that business support piece and increasingly that mental health a component of it too has become so important in the last 2 years. And as I say, it's almost as important, it is as important for my staff to be able to manage their own selves, and that when they're going home to their families, they're able to be present and give their best to their family environment instead of taking home, some difficult conversations that they might have been having on a day-to-day basis.
Just on that regulatory piece, what is the cost of doing business in New Zealand? Is it expensive from a regulatory perspective?
Yes, it is. Costs continue to be imposed on business, but there's very little relief. At some point, costs end up being passed on to the customer, and again, that makes it hard to turn a buck when households are doing it hard. You walk into a hospitality venue and you're seeing, a main meal is going to cost you $40, $50. It's hard for you to commit to coming back sometime soon unless you've got an occasion or a celebration. But that's where most hospitality operators are at the moment. That there is no other means other than to pass on that cost to customers. They're doing their best to keep it lean, and they're offering some incredible deals to get people through the door. But unfortunately, that cost of doing business is something that ends up being passed on to the consumer.
On a personal note, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I had an old boss who told me never miss an opportunity to lead, and I've probably taken that too literally. If I was going back to that, I'd be a little more judicious about the opportunities that I took up. I have probably overexposed myself and taken on too much responsibility, and I think that becomes a burden. And even from a personal point of view, I can see how that's contributed to things that came up in my life that required some adjustment. So I think understanding and being aware of your own limitations, how far you can push yourself without it putting strain somewhere else in your life is really important. That work-life balance piece continues to be really vital, but it's become much harder to maintain in the current climate where it's all about image and how successful you are. My hope is that the generation that's coming behind us is able to leave some of that stuff behind and just focus on all the good elements of life without it becoming overly competitive.
Yeah, I think work-life balance, I think every day there's different things that happen that you have to balance out, right? One day it might be 80% on work. The next day it might be 50% and then 50% on something else. So every day is kind of like a moving target.
Yeah. But the lines become so blurred.
Yes,
they do. The technology means work is always available. It's always in your pocket. And resisting that can be really hard, particularly when you're in a senior position. You've got people who are waiting for you to make decisions or who need a decision to be taken to keep something moving. So I've been trying really hard to put safeguards around that so that I can be present at home in the right way to support my daughter. And by and large, I feel like I've done that well, but there's been some key learnings along the way to get to that point. I don't think that I was particularly good in the beginning.
What are some of your strategies?
I'm very particular about my diary now, so I don't commit to meetings after 3 o'clock on days when I have my daughter. That doesn't mean that I'm not emailing in the evening, but I try to make sure that that period from 3 till when she goes to bed at 8, I'm focused on supporting her with her homework, hearing about her day. Sometimes we'll go for a run, or I'm taking her to some of her sporting activities. So it's very much about trying to ensure that I'm blocking out time so that she can build a relationship with me, particularly at this stage of her life as she becomes a teenager. The importance of her dad will still be there, but it won't be quite on the pedestal that I'm held on at the moment. So that's the most important thing for me, is just making sure I'm blocking out that time and staying true to it, not compromising on it.
That's some really great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Fix and Fly podcast, and I look forward to hearing where you go next.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you enjoy the Fix and Fly podcast, make sure you like, comment and subscribe, and share with anyone you think will find this useful. We look forward to seeing you next time.